Hi, listeners. This is Sarah with a message from the cruising team. As you might already know, we're an independent podcast. So if you want to support the work we're doing, you can donate to us at buymeacoffee.com/cruisingpod. Additionally, if you're looking to hire an audio engineer, an editor, or producer, you can reach out to us directly at cruisingpod@gmail.com. And as always, please follow, subscribe, and leave us a glowing review on your podcast app if you haven't already. It really helps with exposure. Thank you so much for listening. Here's the episode. Hi, listeners. This week, we're working with the Lesbian Herstory Archives to bring you the story of Mabel Hampton. The archives, based in Brooklyn, contain the world's largest collection of materials by and about lesbians, which includes Miss Hampton's extensive oral history interviews recorded between 1976 and 1988. We've pulled bits and pieces from these tapes to patch together as complete a picture of her life as possible. In the episode, you'll hear about Miss Hampton's false arrest for prostitution and her stint at Bedford Hills, a women's prison upstate. You'll hear about her dancing career in the New York theater scene, her late partner Lillian Foster, and then her late-in-life relationship with a new partner named Chris. There is also mention of sexual assault. The majority of these interviews were conducted by Joan Nessel, one of the founders of the Lesbian Herstory Archives and Miss Hampton's close personal friend. We hopped on a call this week to discuss the tapes and the legacy of Miss Hampton.
Miss Hampton was the first lesbian woman I knew. Started when I was 10, I would think. Both Miss Hampton and my mother were working women, and they met in a luncheonette in Queens, and my mother asked Miss Hampton if she would work for her. And Miss Hampton said, I'll give you a 2 weeks trial. And she did. And that relationship ended quickly because my mother's financial instability, she couldn't continue it. But they became friends. And then Miss Hampton became a friend in a different way. When my mother suspected I was a lesbian in the let's say I was born in 1940, I come out in 1958. So let's say in around 1951 or 52, she calls Miss Hampton and says in a drunken state, my mother would have said, Mabel, oh, Mabel, I don't know what to do. I think my daughter's a lesbian. And Miss Hampton, as she says in her tape, says, what's the matter with that? I'm one too. It's perfectly fine. So Miss Hampton and I bonded as a young lesbian woman and an experienced older lesbian woman. And Miss Hampton and Miss Foster took me and my partner, as my partners came into my life, into their lesbian life. And in fact, Miss Hampton always insisted on interviewing all my lovers to make sure they passed her test. And they would come out, and this is when Miss Hampton was living with me, and they'd come out of her bedroom just shaking and say, Miss Hampton said, if I don't treat you right, she's going to come after me with a baseball bat. But our relationship is born from the fact that we were both queers. Lesbians is the word we would have used. But we cared for each other through our lives. We changed the narrative in our own way of the relationships between Black and white women. So at the end of Miss Hampton's life, I was her caretaker. And that was, anyway, it was changing the racial script. One of the things I cherish, at the end of one of the tapes at NYU, I think it was at one, she says, she calls me Miss Nessel, and she says, you are my protege. And that meant more to me than anything.
Can you give us a bit of insight into what it was like interviewing her? I know it happened over at least a decade, right? If not
Yes.
more. And so they're going to be hearing tapes from different times. And so I just think it would be interesting if you were to maybe talk about what it was like for you, or kind of set the scene a little bit of what it was like interviewing her.
Well, the interviews took place in different settings. Some were more formal than others. So they start in the dining room of the apartment where the archives was, right? It was an old-fashioned recorder, and we'd sit and have a cup of tea. But we were friends, and we laughed, and I'd ask questions, and I was trying to be, I was learning as much as I could about doing oral histories, and I was trying to ask what I thought were the right questions, and Miss Hampton would quickly put me in my place and say, so we were learning together. But what I quickly learned, that Miss Hampton was a writer in her storytelling, that Miss Hampton had her own rhythms. She had her own images. She controlled. I would start, and in a way, she was molding the story she was telling. Miss Hampton talked about her love of women in such a way. She'd use the image of burning. Her hands would burn when she saw a beautiful woman. She was so open, and she never showed shame. And part of that was she saw me as a young her, in a way, a young lesbian woman. And Miss Hampton wanted to share her journey and her insights. It was a privilege. It was a privilege to be in her presence, and that she allowed me to ask sometimes silly questions. She understood. She understood the importance of her story. She herself was an archivist. She collected everything she could on Black culture. She was a Rosicrucian, which was a popular group that searched for Eastern mysticism knowledge. She loved the opera, and her study in her apartment on 163rd Street in the Bronx was her archives. So she understood the need for historical resonance, for historical records. And Thursday night was our work night, and there was Miss Hampton, and women came from all over, both America and beyond, to sit at her feet. And that's when she uttered her famous statement that always say, these young faces looking up at her, She'd say, so Miss Hampton, when did you come out? And she'd say, what do you mean come out? I was never in. And as I've written, she was never in her demand for a life that both she could economically survive, which was barely, but filled with roses, filled with cultural beauty of her peoples, her Black people and her queer people. So her imprint is deeply embedded in the archives. But it's her life story that is at the heart of the archives. Plus, Miss Hampton was um, a major historical figure in the sense that she was part of the Harlem Renaissance, that famous and rich moment of Black culture in America in the 1920s. And she knew all the lesbian performers, and she went to Madam Walker's salon, Lila Walker, Madam Walker's daughter's salons. And so the minute she started talking on these tapes, and the minute this knowledge came out, she was sought after by many people in the Black community, because she was witnessing a history that only existed on pages of a book. Miss Hampton has already entered a larger Black history story. And the things that move my heart is when I haven't been in New York now for a long time. I live in Australia, Melbourne, Australia. But a friend had written, and they'd gone to one of the markets in Harlem at one point, and there was a guy selling T-shirts. And on the T-shirts were the list of African American women heroes. And there was Miss Hampton. The archives has done its work. And in the Bronx, where she spent so many years of her life, a street park was named the Miss Mabel Hampton Park. And Lillian Foster, her wife, as she called her, of so many years. Their histories stand for the history of so many queer African Americans forced out of the South by both economics and racism, always racism. And I have to say, as I said, I'm a white woman interpreting her life, and there's something inherently questionable about that. But there'll come a time, and has already started and has been, when women of color, people of color, will tell her story in their own way. To be able to honor her once again, to be able to put her history, to continue it as a living history, and others are picking up on the wonder of her life, on her insistence on respect and inclusion, on her both her blackness and her queerness and the integrity of her being. The more you can put her words in the air, the better.
Were you ever ashamed of being a lesbian, Mabel?
No, I never was ashamed, and never got around to people who was ashamed.
How would you define yourself in the sense of, like, I said, you'll be grandma, and you said, no, you'll be grandpa, and we were teasing. Remember when Lillian and you were here with Deb and I,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And Lillian was sort of your wife,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, she was my wife.
But I want to ask, in all your life, Mabel, did you ever feel like a man? Even though you call yourself, did you ever feel like you were a man?
That's something I can't answer. I just felt like myself, see? And I just loved women. It wasn't no way of being a man or nothing. I just love women. And I've always loved women. Young girls when I was young, girl friends. And I always wanted to have them near me, and we talk. I like to caress them and just feel like they were part of me. See? And it wasn't a matter of going to bed with anybody. I just loved them just because they were women, and I figured that I had to love them. I always dress kind of tailored, skirt and blouse and things like that. But I like the pants and the cap and the hat, but I never consider myself being a man because I never liked the men that much. And anything I don't like, I don't take up. And I always took up being a woman because I like the women and what they stand for, even now all through life. And I try to, if I come in contact with them that need talking to, I talk to them the same way.
What were some words you called yourself? We said laughingly, we were talking about being a stud before. Remember the word stud? Or you would
oh yes, I had quite a lot of my friends. They was known as studs, and the stud comes from the part of the way they dressed, I think. You see, because they dressed masculine and with short hair and things like that. But I didn't care if I kept my hair. I didn't bother with the hair. I just liked the suits and the pants and shoes, and I didn't want to be tied down to anything. I just wanted to be myself.
Being a stud mean being good with women? Like women who
I don't know. I don't know whether it meant being good to them or not, but I was good to them because I liked them. That's why. And they liked me, and I never had any trouble with. Very rarely I had trouble with any of the women.
So be dressing the way you were was being yourself.
So when I dressed, it was what I wanted to be, just myself and nobody else.
I was born in 1902 in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. My mother died about a month after I was born. My grandma raised me, and I sent me to Catholic school. I went to church. Grandma had a lot of big chickens and cows and string beans and all that thing. She sold them. And her name was Lady Hampton. My mother had two sisters. One was in New York and the other was there with us, the youngest one. She took care of me. Grandma was very nice to me, and everybody around there knew me. So one morning, I was getting ready to go to school. and I heard a noise. I don't know what the noise was. So I came in. We had 4 rooms. I came in out of the bedroom. I had heard Grandma get up, but this noise sounded funny. So I rushed out into the kitchen, and she was laying on the floor. So I called the lady next door, and they got the doctor, and Grandma had had a stroke. Well, I felt right then and there that was the end of me. So they sent a telegram to New York, and my aunt, she arrived. And when she arrived, she took possession because she was the oldest of everything. So they buried Grandma, and about a week later, she had sold everything she possibly could get her hands on. Now, I know she's married, but I don't know who he is. She has told her sister that she would take me to New York and put me in school. So we get into New York on this train, and all of a sudden, this man appeared. He was tall, very dark, and with beautiful wavy hair. I looked at this guy and said, I don't like him. So my aunt says, Mabel, this is your Uncle George. We goes into West 8th Street. That was New York, 52 West 8th Street. So he says to me, well, this is your new home. That was on a Sunday. In there was an altar, and on this altar was a Bible. The altar had a cloth. I'd never seen one like, but I knew it was some form of a church. Over in another corner was a piano. He says, it's almost time for meeting. So I didn't like him. Something was wrong with him, I knew. So after people about 8 or 9 people came. So after the meeting was over, he preached. And I said to myself, damn, he's a good-looking man. Well, what about him I don't like? And I didn't like my aunt to start off with. But I knew Grandma was dead, and there's nothing I could do. So next day, he told me, asked me, could I sing? I told him yes. So he says, well, I'll tell you what you do. He says, on Wednesday or some part near the week, we are going out in different alleys and different places, and you sing. So that's what we did. And people would throw money out, and he'd pick up the money. I didn't get it. Come back home. That went on for about, I should say about 7 or 8 months, maybe longer. In the meantime, he starts getting fresh. And I didn't like him. I thought there was something wrong with him. So, in other words, he raped me. That was the end of that. And then because he said, if you tell your aunt, I'll kill you. And I was sleeping outside the door was something where they put wood and coal and stuff like that. He made a pallet out there and made me sleep out there. Well, I wasn't used to that. So after I got myself together, I went to school. They signed me in school a couple of weeks after I came there. And in school, I got in a fight with a white girl. And I didn't mean to hurt her. I just meant to slap her around a little bit. See? So she had my aunt to come to school, and uncle, and told them that I wasn't a good girl, and blah blah blah. So he says, now when you come home, I'm going to whip you. Well, I couldn't have him whipping on me. He was fresh anyhow. So when I got out of school, instead of going home, I disappeared. I walked all the way around that park, all the way around 9th Avenue, all the way around here somewhere. And I was standing on the corner. And this woman says, the colored woman come up to me. She said, "What are you doing down here?" She said, "Aren't you Miss Smith's little girl?" I said, "Yeah." She says, "Now you take this nickel." At that time, the subways was a nickel. He says, "You take this nickel and go uptown, and I'm going to tell her that I sent you." I felt sorry for the little girl, whoever she was. So I took the nickel and went down into the subway. The train came in. I got on the train, put the nickel in, and got on the train. I sat there, and I sat there, and I sat there, and I sat there. Finally, the man says, "All out." Well, I had to go out. So I got out and come up into the street. And when I came up into the street, I seen so many people walking around. I knew it was a strange place. I'd seen a park with a lot of kids in it. Well, I hadn't been in a park in all my life. I haven't been in the swing since way before Mama died. I called her Mama. So I goes in there and I began to swing and play with the kids. I stayed there so long, it began to get dark. It was in the summertime. And because I had no coat. So all of a sudden, well, a little boy came up to me and a girl and says, what are you doing here?" I wasn't dumb by any means. I says, my aunt left me here. And I'm waiting for her to come and get me. So the girl says, "I'll go after the coat. You go after the cop." Well, I didn't want to see no cop. That's one sure thing. I had enough education to know what the cop would do. I didn't want no cop. So I stood there and waited outside of the gate. And all of a sudden, down the street, here she was. She had a woman with her. She says, "Well, you can't stay here. It's getting late." And she took me home with her. And I got there. She told her mother what had happened. So mother says, "Give her something to eat and put her to bed. Maybe her aunt will call for her." But I myself knew that no aunt was calling for me. I had just disappeared into thin air. Well, I stayed with with Mrs. White for about 6 or 7 years. Then I graduated from 32 school, and I went to New York.
These are in the beginning of the 1920s.
It had to be.
Yeah.
23, I was in Bedford.
Yeah, we got to tell that story, honey.
Okay. Viola Belfield. I think that was her name. Colored girl. These girls, all they like to pick up a man, says he buy him a soda and stuff. He asked us would we go to a cabaret. So I said, "Oh, yes." He says, "Well, I'll take you there. And my boyfriend and I will give you a soda and we'll sit there." So Viola was at my house. We dressed and waited for them. They came about 9 o'clock, this man did. He knocks at the door. I opens the door and let him in, him and his friend. Now he's wait till we get our jacket or whatever it was when we're going out. While we're standing there talking, the door opens and 2 white men walked in. Great big white men. I said, "Who are you and what do you want?" He says, "We're raiding the house." You heard me. I said, "For what?" He says, "Prostitution." And I hadn't been with a man no time. I couldn't figure. "Come on," he says, "come on, get your coat and hat." They took us downtown.
So they set you up?
Sure was set up. He set his own mother up. So we stayed overnight. And next morning we was taken in front of a judge. She sit up there and she says, "Well, only thing I can say, Bedford." my God. No lawyer, no nothing. Up to Bedford I was sent. And there was a woman with me. Says, do you know how long you're going to be here? I says, well, it seems like I'll be here for 3 years. I says, but I don't think I'll be here for 3 years. She said, why? I said, because I haven't done anything. What have I done? She says, well, that judge don't give a darn whether you do anything or not. She gets paid to send you up there. I said, well, that's a terrible way of making a living. He said, I know it is.
Who was the woman who was talking to you?
Huh?
Who was this woman?
This woman turned out to be, she was my investigator. So we're riding Bedford Hill. Now she said, I'll take you to the dormitory.
Was she black or white?
She was white. Mm-hmm. All these are white people. So she said, I'll take you to where the girls sleep at. I got through eating. Had a very nice dinner. Our dining room was about as long as from here to that store up there, bookstore. And all the girls, women together must have been, I couldn't count them all, no, 15 or 20. There were women, there wasn't young girls. They could have been young girls. I didn't pay them any attention. So,
Were they mostly, what color were they made?
White and black. White and black they were, see. So I thought, well, what kind of place is this? Oh, they had good food. Always did. I don't know where it come from, but they had good food. So she says, and then we go back and make up our beds and sit around and talk. So that ended the first day. The second day was the same thing all over again.
Did you see any signs of lesbian?
Not then, no. So later on, about 2 or 3 days though, everybody would talk, they would whisper. So I said to this girl who had been talking, she laughed. She said, don't pay those creeps any mind. Those dykes don't mean anything. I said, what the hell does she mean by dykes? I wouldn't say nothing. So she says, you belong to a girls' club? I says, yeah. Mm-hmm. So what'd you do there? Nothing but talk. This same girl said, you want to go for a walk? I says, no, I don't want to walk. She says, why? Why don't you talk? I said, I have nothing to say. She says, well, all right, you and I started walking. So we started walking. She took my hand, guided me along. She says, any of the girls up here you like? I looked and I said, what is she trying to dig out of me? I said, no, outside of you and the white woman down in the office. He said, all the women likes her because she's nice, and also her husband. So she said, you don't know me. She says, my name is Ruth. Put her arm around me and says, I like you. I said, yeah, all right. I said, I like you too. Yo, that makes much better. So she says, you want to come and sleep in my bed tonight? I said, I don't know. Oh, she said, I don't know whether you like me the way I like you. I said, no, I guess not. And I would sit there. Said, no more time to go to bed. Went to bed. She took me in her bed. And she held me in her arms and she kissed me. I wasn't so big. I was much smaller than I am now because I wore a 12 dress. See, very small. I wore 4 shoes. See. Well, next day, every day was about the same thing. Clean up your room and talk to the girls. They were all seasoned women. See, well, they was prostitutes and different things. One woman up there had a house in the city, she told us. And this house is run by another woman. And they had
they have men, cops, and everything come in there, prostitute, and then they would come up to visit her and give her money. See, she made lots of money. Then I began to take notice. This one was parallel off. This one was parallel off. They go this way, they go that way. I said to myself, that's funny. I believe they like girls. I said, I have a stinking idea they like girls. I said, well, I like this one. So it went on like that for a month or two. Then she was going somewhere, she'd kiss me goodbye. So I said, yeah, I like her kisses. I said to myself, nobody else. And from one to the other, they would try to pump me and ask me questions, or pump her, ask her questions. She says, none of your damn business. So we made love a couple of times, and it was nice. So time went on. That made me stay there 1 year and about 6 or 7 months, say, out of the 3. After I was there for a while, the investigator came up, and she talked to this woman, and then she says, Mabel, would you want to go back to Jersey, not New York? He said, you can't go to New York, because that's where you was picked up at. She says, you're in Morningside Avenue. So you can't go back there. Is there anybody else you could go to? I said, oh, yes. So I call this woman's name and I says, I can go and stay with her. She says, now you can go tomorrow. You can leave tomorrow. I'll take you to this woman's house. But you're not to go to New York. Okay, so we were gone in the car. We come home to Jersey City, and this woman said, Mabel, I haven't seen you in such a long time. Why did you get yourself in trouble? She reminded me of that bitch over there.
Anita Bryan, say her name, because people won't know who you're pointing to.
Huh?
You have to say that bitch's name, because women who hear this won't know what you're pointing to.
Okay.
Anita Bryan.
Just reminds me of Anita Bryan. So she says, when I got there, you should have been ashamed of yourself. So time went on. The white woman appeared in a gray car.
Which white woman? The one from
the woman from that had the whorehouse.
That you met in Bedford.
That I met in Bedford. Contact the woman that she went with. And that woman had a girl, white girl. And they palled around. Wasn't nothing to them, but they palled around.
So they were lesbians
so
and they were
everything was lesbians now.
And also prostitutes.
And prostitutes and lesbians. So.
Lesbian prostitutes. I mean, lesbian women who were
prostitutes.
Yeah.
So she said, you want to go for a drive? I said, I went upstairs and got my jacket, flew down. I said, if New York is around the corner, then I'm gone. So we gets in the car and goes right straight on over to New York. Went to Cabaret, and that's how I met Ethel Wallace and those people, you know. See, I met so many people that this girl knew. And this woman who was the head of this house knew. They all was friends.
So she took you, do you remember the cabaret? The name of it or where it was?
Wait a minute now. I know I went to Small's Paradise. I went to it's on an end of my tongue. Oh, I can't think of it now. I will, though,
and
as I go along.
You talk about meeting Gladys Bentley. Did you get to meet her, Gladys Bentley?
I didn't meet her then. I met her a year later when I come back to New York for good.
Do you think living in New York City made it easier for you to be a lesbian than if you'd lived someplace else? Like in a small town?
Yes, in a small town, you wouldn't have a chance to get around and meet people. Now, in New York, you met them all over the place, from the theater to hospital, from the hospital to anything.
Do you remember the first time, approximately, that you went to the village as a lesbian? That you
Went to the village?
Right, as a lesbian woman, that you knew you were going to the village because that's where other lesbians hung out.
No, the first time I was going down there all the time. I didn't know first time in it. After I started out and got in show with the showgirls, we'd go down there and some of those. Then at that time I was acting at the Sherry Lane Theater.
Right, and what time was this? Therefore, this was 1920s, the 1920s.
Yeah, it was around in that time. It was 1920s.
But you knew that the village was a place where lesbians went?
Well, I wasn't sure, but I knew you could go down there and meet up with quite a few of them.
Do you remember about what year you started working in the theater?
Around 1918, something like that.
1918? That would be before you went to Bedford Hills?
Yeah, before I went to Bedford Hills. And then when I come out, I started to all over again.
You used to tell me in the show there was a whole language for skin color in the girls. Do you remember that? Like a smoky, remember?
Yeah, there's the DC and SJ.
Oh, what was an SJ?
SJ was small. SJ was Smoky Joe.
And what did that mean? You have to tell us.
Well, that means a brown-skinned woman. See? And DC was a dark cloud. That means a dark woman, black woman. Mm-hmm. See? And OF meant Old Faye. That was a white woman. Mm-hmm. And there was other things that they had in there. They introduced it into the show that they had. That's how I remember so much of it. So,
which show? Is this Shuffling Along?
No, it wasn't Shuffle Along. It was just an ordinary show, dance show.
What was the first show you remember you being in?
First show that I was in?
On the Lafayette.
I think it was Come Along Manda. I think that was the first show. Come Along, there was dancing in that. I didn't stay too long. I went to the Garden of Joy, and there I stayed quite a little bit. I danced, and some more girls was with me. They sang and danced.
Okay, let's go. Did you hang around a lot in Harlem, in the gay community in Harlem?
Well, yes, I knew. Of course, I was in with the show people, quite a few, and we'd go to nightclubs and different places, you know.
What years is it these now?
Well, all that happened before I moved to the Bronx. Mm-hmm. So I moved to the Bronx in 1943. I think it was 1943. See, so all of that had to happen in between the 20s and the 40s.
Tell us, I remember when they used to have those big drag dances, the drag balls.
Oh, well, the drag balls are different. Everybody went to those. The women wore pants and the men wore dresses.
When was that?
See,
when was
that and drag ball, that happened in, I think that happened in the 25 or 26, something like that.
Did you ever feel oppressed? You know what I mean by the word oppressed? Did you ever feel people were cruel to you because you were black and because you were a lesbian? Did you ever feel prejudice?
No, I never did. With the lesbian part, no. They treated me so nice until I couldn't think of people being cruel.
And what about being black? Did you feel people were cruel to you sometimes or unkind?
I tell you, Joni, I didn't go in that type of people. I didn't go around those type of people. I could sense anything that I didn't like, even if I went to church and they act any funny, I wouldn't go no more. I do the same thing now.
Do you remember some of the names of your women friends at that time, Mabel?
Oh, yeah. I remember there was Viola Belfield, and Lillian Carnegie, and Ruth.
Were they all in the Life?
Yeah.
What did they look like? Just can you describe what they wore and stuff?
Oh, well, they wore dresses and things like that.
Did they wear pants? Did any of them wear pants?
No, very few of my women's friends wore pants. They didn't pay it any attention.
Even the butches wore dresses?
All the butchers, they wore pants and dresses and dresses and pants.
So they could wear, but
They wore anything. That's when you was going to your house to a party, you know. If you're going there to a party, well, naturally you would dress accordingly.
And what would that be?
Sometimes we'd take a suitcase and carry slacks and wear a skirt and blouse, carry slacks and put them on.
Is that because you didn't want to be in the street in slacks?
Well, you don't ask for trouble, you know. See, and I never did ask for trouble.
We have a photograph of you from that time period, I think. Maybe I'll show it to you, where you're wearing slacks and a sweater, and your hands are in your sweater pocket.
Yeah.
So you did wear pants.
Oh
sometimes.
yeah, I wore pants occasionally, sure. And when I moved up in the Bronx, I didn't wear nothing but slacks. See, that was later years. 1943, going on 44, we hit the Bronx. And we moved to 639. Now, there's a woman there that knew me very well. And I used to go up to her house. At her house, we had the marriage between two women.
Oh, talk about, what year was that, Mabel?
Oh, God. Oh, the marriage was after I met Lillian.
So that's around 1939?
That was around 1938, something like that. We was living next door, and she says, neighbor, she says, you know Florence, I forget what Florence's last name, she's getting married. So Lillian says, no, she can't. She says, yes, she's going down, and her and her friend, and her and her mama is going down and get the marriage certificate, and Reverend Monroe will marry them. So that's how I knew he was gay. We went to this wedding. The guests started arriving, and I see more people that I knew.
Is it all women?
All women, yeah, it was all women. It wasn't no men. They're outside the minister, that's all. And, of course, one of the girls, the girl who was marrying the other girl, her mother gave her away.
Was she wearing, how were they dressed, the bride?
Well, dressed with pants. They had pants on.
Both of them?
No, not both of them. The girl had a veil, a wedding dress, and her veil. She had the bride had the gown on,
the other woman have?
and the other woman had on pants. She had on white pants. See, she was dressed in white too, and so was the bride. And they had went down. They passed downtown at the
City Hall.
City Hall.
How did they do that?
I don't know. That girl looked so much like a fella you couldn't tell her apart, just like some of them do today. She was spit image, and she didn't have to change her voice. She had a heavy voice anyhow.
Did a lot of lesbians that you?
I didn't know too many now that got married. I heard about them, but not too many.
And what year did you meet Lillian?
1932, in October.
How old were you then, Mabel? 1932. You were born in so you were around 30.
Yeah. Yeah. I was an old woman.
You was an old woman?
I was an old woman. I had my day off. The day off, I went downtown, fooled around, come back. And on Lexington Avenue and 102nd Street, somewhere there, I seen the streetcar coming, and it was full. So I said, I can't get on the streetcar. So there was a little woman about 4'10". She says, you want to get on there? I said, yeah. She said, well, come on. So she jumps up, pushing some old people out the way. And I was fresh as dishwater. I jumped up there and I looked her over. See? So she says, where do you live? I said, I live up in 122nd Street. I have an apartment there. So she said, oh, I live in 132nd Street. I said, well, yeah. That was the year of 1932. She said, you live by yourself? I said, yeah. So she says, you married? I said, no, I'm not married. I don't like men that well. Why should I marry? She said, either mine. So now, that's better. That makes the cheese more binding. So I got off the streetcar, and she gave me her address, and I give her mine. I said, I'll see you again. I goes on home. Next couple of days, I thought about this chick. I says, oh boy, I go to call on her. So I went to call on her, but she wasn't home. I left word that I was there. She had forgotten me. 2 days later, I went back up there and caught her. I said, you don't remember me? You said you was coming to see me. She says, please excuse me. I forgot it. There's so much happening, and my niece is here with me. So I said, well, come on over to the house and have dinner. So she came to the house and had dinner. So about a month later, make a long story short, this girl, Lillian Forster, came to live with me. And that was in the year of October the 10th, 1932. And she stayed with me till 1978, when she passed away. I loved her. I didn't have nobody else but her. See, she had a family and I didn't. So I knew I had to stay with somebody. And so I just stayed with her. And we went to dances, we went to parties, our friends would come. They said, oh, Mabel, my God, you settled down? I remember the time you were just running after the women. I said, now keep that to yourself. Don't come telling it to my wife. Keep that to yourself. So she was a presser. She pressed for different clothes. Like she worked in the French dry cleaners, and she pressed all for the famous stars. She pressed. And me, I just did ordinary work. I cooked. I cleaned. I taught her she couldn't cook an egg without burning the pot. I had to teach her to cook. And when she got through teaching her, she cooked better than I. So I stopped cooking. I wouldn't eat unless she cooked. She could make cornbread, light bread, pies, cakes, everything. And I just stopped cooking. Then, in 1948, we moved to up in the Bronx. And there it was peaceful, very peaceful. I went to work for the Jacoby Hospital. And there I kind of had myself caught up with a couple of girls, but it was nice. Well, you see, I couldn't sit down and do nothing. So I did steal a little bit here and steal a little bit there. So that's the way it was till the very end.
Do you know, by the way, that Eleanor Roosevelt was a lesbian, had lesbian affairs? Did you? That's just
well,
come
I
out
heard
now.
that many years back. I heard it with the white girl I was going with would come over to Jersey and pick me up, carried me to Lydia Walker's house, and that's how I heard a lot of things,
And you heard then that Eleanor Roosevelt was a lesbian?
That she was in the life, she was gay. They didn't say that, but
they said in the life. Right?
Yes, in life.
You've seen language change a lot. In other words, in the old days, you never used the word gay, right?
No.
Can you trace, like, the first expression you heard was in the life? Was that the first expression you heard for gay people? Back.
No, that wasn't the way I heard it. The way I heard it was women lovers. And women lovers and bulldikers and women lovers.
What did you and Lillian call yourselves? Or what did your friends call you?
We were sweethearts. See?
But were you using the word lesbian then?
Sometimes, very, very seldom.
But I never knew nothing about all this stuff until here lately. In the past 12 months, I've discovered so much that I didn't know.
In the past 12 months?
That's right.
What? Like what?
With Chris. I learned so much until I don't know what to do with myself.
Of what kinds of things?
Well, I tell you, she told me a lot of things. Chris did, see, and
that you didn't know?
No, I didn't know.
How did you like to make love, Mabel?
It was all right with me.
How did you like it, though? Did you like to get on top?
Yep. I did not turn around. She'd do it to me. I go over and get another girl and do it to her. See, I got a kick out of it. See.
Did you like sex, Mabel?
I wasn't so particular about it. I was very, I admit, I'm a peculiar person. It's okay. But I feel more about it now than I did then.
Because I've heard you say things like you say now, that you feel real passion.
Yeah, and then I didn't do it. Then it wasn't like that before.
Why do you think now?
I guess the Chris, she's an experienced woman. I didn't bother with the experienced women. So, and she'd sit down and talk to me. See, that's why I like her. She's told me everything.
So you can always learn something, huh?
Oh, you'll learn too damn much if you ask me. See, she's been with so many women.
How many women have you been with, Mabel, you figure?
Oh, I guess I played around with about a dozen or so. I got along all right, but I always stayed to myself mostly. But I liked them, though. Liked them very much.
Women?
Yep.
Yeah, well, I evidently.
Yep. Both of these songs are very dear to my heart. And one is for one girlfriend and the other is for my protege, Miss Nessel. Only believe that things are impossible. Only believe and save thousand stored. Then when I see that others be waiting, I would have known impossible to be. Days are long since you went away. I've dreamed about you all through the day, my buddy, my buddy. Nobody's quite so true. I miss the smile, the touch of your hand, and I long to know that you understand, my buddy, my buddy. Your buddy misses you.
Cruising is independently reported and produced by a small but mighty team of 3. Story producer and social media manager Rachel Karp, line producer and resident road trip driver Jen McGinnity, and story producer and audio engineer me, Sarah Gabrielli. Our theme song is by Joey Freeman. You can find us at our website, cruisingpod.com, on social media at cruisingpod, or support us at buymeacoffee.com/cruisingpod. Listen to Cruising wherever you get your podcasts.